The day I received a full scholarship to an Ivy League university was the day my parents' 5-year life finally shattered. They had told my school I was intellectually disabled, and for years I believed them. My name is Alina. From age 12, my official school records listed me as having a profound intellectual disability, a diagnosis my parents insisted was true. But in the quiet of my room, I was secretly teaching myself calculus from library books. This is the story of a girl who had to become her own teacher, her own advocate, and the devastating cost of proving your own parents lied. To understand the lie, you have to understand my family. We lived in a small, immaculate house in suburban Ohio. My father, Robert, was an insurance adjuster, my mother, Carol, stayed home, and my older brother, Michael, was their masterpiece. Michael was 2 years older, a natural athlete, effortlessly popular. He brought home trophies for soccer and straight B+s, which were framed and hung in the hallway. I was the quiet shadow. While he had friends over, I was in my room reading, not children's books, but whatever I could find at the library. I taught myself the periodic table in 5th grade because the pictures were fascinating. I'd try to talk about it at dinner. My father would chew his meatloaf, not looking up. "Alina, no one understands what you're saying, it's rude." My mother would pat my hand. "Just eat, sweetie, you're confusing yourself." The shift started in 6th grade. We had mandatory standardized testing. I finished the math section in 15 minutes. A week later, my homeroom teacher, Mrs. Gable, pulled me aside. Her eyes were kind but puzzled. "Alina, your score was in the 99th percentile for mathematical reasoning. That's extraordinary. Have your parents ever talked to you about advanced placement?" I didn't know what that meant. I shook my head. That afternoon, I practically floated off the bus, the first extraordinary thing anyone had ever said about me clutched in my hand. I showed my mother the note Mrs. Gable had written. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She read it slowly. "Oh, these tests are so flawed, honey. They just want to push kids too fast. It's not healthy." She folded the note and put it in her apron pocket. "Let's not bother your father with this. He has enough stress." But Mrs. Gable didn't drop it. She called a parent-teacher conference. I remember sitting outside the principal's office, listening to the muffled voices. My mother's tone was soft, concerned. My father's was firm. "With all due respect," he said, "we know our daughter. She struggles. She's in her own world. This test is an outlier." The principal suggested a full psychoeducational evaluation by the district to get a clear picture. My parents agreed immediately. Too quickly, I realize now. Here's where the system failed me for the first time. The evaluation relied heavily on parent input and observation. My parents filled out pages of questionnaires. They described a child who couldn't follow simple instructions, who had violent tantrums when frustrated, who needed constant supervision. None of it was true, but they were convincing, concerned, and white in a school district that was 90% white. No one doubted them. The school psychologist observed me once for 30 minutes in a strange room. I was terrified and silent. My file grew thick with their assumptions. The diagnosis came back: intellectual disability moderate. The recommended placement was a self-contained special education classroom with a focus on life skills: baking, counting change, basic hygiene. My parents signed the paperwork without a word to me. They sat me down that night. My father's hand was on my shoulder. "The doctors say school is just too hard for you, Alina. Your brain works differently, but we'll take care of you. You don't have to worry about a thing." I was 12 years old. I believed doctors. I believed my parents. A deep, shameful confusion settled in my bones. Was I crazy? Were the numbers in my head, the patterns I saw, just a trick? I started to doubt my own mind. That was their first victory. Life became a schedule of simplicity. My classes were on the first floor, a world away from the regular middle school corridors. We learned to make instant pudding. We practiced telling time on a cardboard clock. The other students had real, profound needs. I was an imposter, but I didn't know how to say it. I learned to make my eyes blank, to move slowly, to perform the incapacity everyone expected. But at night, a rebellion sparked. It started with a forgotten algebra textbook left on a library cart. I smuggled it home under my sweater. In the blue light of my desk lamp, a world opened up. Variables, equations, logic. It made more sense than any pudding recipe. This was a language no one could tell me. I was too broken to understand. I became a ghost in two worlds. By day, I was Alina who needed help tying her shoes. By night, I was a scholar of stolen knowledge. I cycled through library books on physics, chemistry, world history. I kept a secret notebook written in a cipher I invented, hidden inside a ripped mattress seam. My grades and my life skills classes were mediocre. My real education was measured in filled notebooks. My brother Michael breezed through high school. My parents attended every game, every award ceremony. Our house was a shrine to his adequacy. I was the secret they managed, the problem contained in a special Eid wing. Their friends would ask about me. My mother's voice would drop to a sympathetic whisper. "She's doing okay, all things considered. We just want her to be happy." It was a performance of martyrdom, and I was the prop. The lie required maintenance. When I was 15, a new young special Eid teacher, Mr. Davies, noticed I finished complex patterning worksheets instantly. He suggested a reevaluation. My parents were furious. They pulled me out of his class, complaining to the principal that he was pushing their vulnerable daughter beyond her limits and causing anxiety. He was reassigned by Christmas. That was the moment I understood it wasn't a mistake, it was a policy. The crack in their perfect system came from the most mundane place, the public library. I was 17, still in a modified high school program, officially slated for a transition to supported living. I was using a library computer to print a bus schedule when it froze. An older librarian, Ms. Jenkins, came over to help. As she rebooted the system, she saw the tabs I had open: MIT OpenCourseware, a page on astrophysics, a digital copy of Plato's Republic. She didn't say anything then, but the next week she found me in the stacks. She slid a book across the table. The Making of the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes. This one's dense, she said quietly, but I have a feeling you'll keep up. She became my guardian angel. She let me into the staff room to use better computers. She taught me how to use academic databases. She never asked about my school, my parents. She just fed my hunger. One afternoon, she looked at me, her glasses low on her nose. "Alina, what are your plans after, whatever comes next for you?" I stared at my hands. I don't know, maybe a sheltered workshop. She was silent for a long time. "Have you ever taken a practice SAT?" I hadn't, I wasn't allowed. The school said it wasn't developmentally appropriate. Ms. Jenkins printed one out. "Take this home, do it in secret, bring it back to me." I scored a 1580. She didn't gasp, she just nodded like she'd confirmed a suspicion. "Okay," she said, "okay, the game has changed." She devised a plan. I would study for the real SAT using library materials. She would help me research colleges with robust financial aid for independent students. I was 18. I could apply without my parents, but I needed one thing from the school: my official transcript and records. To any admissions office, my current file would read like a diagnosis of incompetence. I needed to understand the full lie before I could dismantle it. So the week of my 19th birthday, I walked into the high school guidance office. I used a legal right I'd researched to access my own educational records. The secretary, looking uncomfortable, handed me a thick, sealed envelope. I didn't open it until I was in the library bathroom, locked in a stall. My hands shook. I pulled out the stack of papers. There were the test scores from 6th grade, the 99th percentile note from Mrs. Gable, then the subsequent evaluation request, and then I saw it, the parent intake form. In my mother's looping handwriting, under the question, "Describe your child's biggest challenges," she had written, "Alina cannot think abstractly. She becomes violently upset when presented with any intellectual task. She will never live independently. We fear for her safety." But beneath that, in the section for parent signature, was my father's bold, sharp hand. And next to it, he had added a note, just 2 words that I will never forget. 2 words that proved they knew exactly what they were doing from the very beginning. The 2 words were "manage expectations." In my father's own writing, a cold, clinical footnote to my destruction. They didn't fear for me, they were managing me, and in that fluorescent-lit bathroom stall, the shame vanished. It was replaced by a cold, clean fury. I had my proof. I shoved the papers back into the envelope. My hands were steady now. I found Ms. Jenkins at the reference desk. I didn't say a word, I just slid the envelope across the counter. She read the first few pages, her expression growing grim. When she got to my father's note, she looked up at me. "We need to make copies of every single page, right now." We used the library's scanner. The hum of the machine felt like a countdown. As we worked, she laid out the battlefield. "Your official record is a weapon they built. We need to build a bigger one. You need a current, legitimate evaluation from an independent psychologist, and you need to take the actual SAT. But Alina, this will mean war with your parents. Are you ready for that?" I looked at the scanned image of my 6th grade test score. They've been at war with me since I was 12. I just didn't know I was allowed to fight back. The independent evaluation cost money I didn't have. Ms. Jenkins paid for it out of her own pocket, a fact I wouldn't learn until years later. She found a psychologist, Dr. Liana Moss, who specialized in assessing twice exceptional and misdiagnosed youth. The assessment took 2 full days. IQ tests, achievement batteries, personality inventories, hours of interviews. Dr. Moss was thorough and impassive. At the end of the 2nd day, she removed her glasses. "Alina, I need to ask you a serious question. Have you ever been assessed for giftedness?" I almost laughed. "No, I've been assessed for inability." She nodded slowly. "Your cognitive profile is in the very superior range. Your quantitative and spatial reasoning are at a level I see maybe once a year. The discrepancies between your performance and your school records are alarming. The narrative of intellectual disability is not just incorrect. It is, in my professional opinion, fabricated." She handed me her preliminary report. The summary line burned into my mind. "Findings consistent with a profound educational neglect and probable factitious disorder imposed by caregivers." I had the words, now I needed the numbers. Registering for the SAT without a parent or school was a maze of loopholes. Ms. Jenkins posed as my educational liaison. We used the library's address. On a Saturday morning in October, I sat in a room full of high school juniors at a testing center 30 miles away. No one knew the girl in the back row, her hands slightly trembling, was officially classified as needing help to tell time. 3 weeks later, the score arrived at the library P.O. box Ms. Jenkins had helped me open. 1590, near perfect. We had the arsenal, now came the first strike. Ms. Jenkins and I crafted a packet. It contained Dr. Moss's evaluation, my SAT score, a sample of my independent academic work, and a formal, legal-sounding request for an immediate reevaluation of my IEP, my individualized education program. I didn't deliver it, I needed to see their faces. I waited until a Tuesday evening. My father was watching the news. My mother was folding laundry. I placed the thick envelope on the coffee table. "What's this?" my father asked, not looking away from the TV. "My academic records," I said, my voice clearer than it had ever been in that house. "The real ones." He muted the television. My mother stopped folding. He opened the envelope, skimmed the first page. His face, usually a mask of bland authority, flushed a deep red. He read Dr. Moss's conclusion aloud, his voice a low growl. "Fabricated. You went behind our backs to some quack." "She's a licensed clinical psychologist," I said. "Her credentials are on page 2. My mother picked up the SAT score sheet. "Where did you get this? This is a fake." "I took the test at the Harmon Testing Center. You can verify it with the college board." The room went silent. My father stood up, his shadow falling over me. "You have been lied to, Alina. These people are filling your head with dangerous ideas. You are not capable of this. He waved the report. "This fantasy will only lead to heartbreak. We have protected you from that." "Protected me?" The word burst out of me. "You had me baking muffins while you told the world I was retarded." My mother gasped, "Don't use that word." "It's the word in my file, Mom, because you put it there." My father's control snapped. He tore Dr. Moss's report in half, then in half again. "This is garbage. You will not pursue this. You will not contact these people again. Your place is here. Your program is settled. End of discussion." He thought tearing up the paper would end it. He didn't understand that the proof was digital, copied, stored in multiple places. The physical act was just a confession of his own panic. I looked at the pieces on the floor, then back at him. "It's not a discussion. I've already submitted a formal request to the school district for an IEP review. Under federal law, they have to respond, and they'll have this packet too." The fury in his eyes was pure, unadulterated terror. I had invoked a system bigger than his authority. I went to my room and locked the door. I could hear them arguing downstairs, their voices a harsh, desperate murmur. The house no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a trench, and the war was now open. The school district's response was a masterpiece of bureaucratic caution. They agreed to a review meeting but insisted my parents be present. The stage was set for a showdown. The meeting room was cold. On one side of the table, me, Ms. Jenkins as my advocate, and a nervous-looking aide from a disability rights nonprofit Ms. Jenkins had contacted. On the other, my parents, the school psychologist, my special education teacher, and the vice principal. My father began with practiced concern. "We're worried about Alina's mental state. She's fallen in with individuals who are encouraging delusions of grandeur. This packet is a cry for help, not an academic record." The vice principal, a man named Mr. Hendricks, looked uncomfortable. He turned to me. "Alina, these test scores are extraordinary. Can you explain the discrepancy with your daily performance?" My special ed teacher, Mrs. Albright, chimed in. "In class, Alina struggles with basic sequencing tasks. She often needs instructions repeated." Ms. Jenkins spoke before I could. "Mrs. Albright, what is the highest level academic task you have ever assigned Alina?" The teacher blinked. "Well, we work on functional math, making change, reading simple instructions." "So you have never assigned her algebra, chemistry, critical analysis of a text?" "Of course not. That's not in her IEP, her cognitive level." "Is based on fraudulent input," Ms. Jenkins finished, sliding a copy of my parents' original intake forms toward the center of the table. She had highlighted their most damning claims. The school psychologist, Dr. Fremont, spoke next. "The original evaluation was comprehensive. Parental input is a critical component. Are you suggesting Mr. and Mrs. Vance deliberately misled this district?" I looked straight at my father. "Yes." The word hung in the air. My mother started to cry soft, performative tears. "How can you say that? We've given up everything for you." Ms. Jenkins ignored her. "We are suggesting that the district has a legal and ethical obligation to reassess Alina based on current, objective data provided by a neutral expert." She placed Dr. Moss's full report on the table. "We are also prepared to file a due process complaint if this meeting fails to result in appropriate action." The phrase due process complaint changed the temperature in the room. It meant lawyers, it meant state hearings, it meant scrutiny. Mr. Hendricks cleared his throat. We will, of course, consider the new information. We can schedule a new round of assessments through the district. My father slammed his hand on the table. No, we do not consent. We are her parents. We decide what is best. And then the pivot. Ms. Jenkins looked at him, her voice lethally calm. Alina is 19, Mr. Vance. She is a legal adult. Your consent is not required. The silence was absolute. In their campaign to infantilize me, they had forgotten I would age out of their control. The law, for the first time, was on my side. The meeting ended in a stalemate, but the ground had shifted. The district, fearing litigation, agreed to an independent reevaluation at their expense. My parents were sidelined. They drove home in a silence thicker than any we'd ever shared. That night the retaliation began. My father changed the Wi-Fi password. My mother cleaned my room and threw out my secret stash of library books, claiming she thought they were trash. They sat me down for a new strategy: guilt. Alina, think of the embarrassment, my mother pleaded. People will think we're monsters. Your brother's reputation, our standing in the church. Is your pride worth destroying this family? It was the wrong approach. It showed me their true currency appearance. I wasn't a daughter, I was a potential scandal. A week later, a letter arrived from the district. My new evaluations were scheduled. My father intercepted the mail. He opened it in front of me, his face hardening. This stops now. He didn't yell, he just picked up the phone and called the school district office. I listened from the hallway. He used a voice I'd never heard, slick, confident, lawyerly. Yes, this is Robert Vance. Regarding the reevaluation for my daughter Alina, I wanted to inform you that she has been hospitalized. A severe psychiatric episode. Yes, very tragic. The stress of these outside influences. No, we don't know when she'll be stable enough for testing. We'll be in touch. He hung up, he looked at me, and there was a terrible triumph in his eyes. He had found a lie the system would accept without question. The crazy girl, it was the ultimate trump card. I stood frozen in the hallway. He had just declared me insane to the outside world. With one phone call, he could lock down every avenue I had. I had my test scores, my reports, my advocate. But he had the one thing that could neutralize it all: parental authority and a willingness to weaponize a psychiatric label. I had to get out, not eventually. Now, that night I packed a single backpack with my scanned documents, a change of clothes, and the $200 in birthday cash I'd hidden from years past. I waited until 3 in the morning. I wrote a one-line note and left it on my bed. I am not crazy. I slipped out my window, down the porch trellis, and into the dark. I had no plan, no destination. Just a backpack of proof and the terrifying, exhilarating knowledge that I had just become a runaway, and my parents' first call in the morning would be to the police to report their disabled, mentally unstable daughter missing. I spent my first night of freedom in a 24-hour laundromat, jumping at every car that passed. By sunrise, I knew I had about 6 hours before my parents would call the police. My face would be on a flyer for a vulnerable missing adult. I wasn't just running from my family, I was running from the story they had written for me. My first call was to Ms. Jenkins's cell phone from a payphone outside a gas station. Her voice was tight with worry. Alina, where are you? Your mother called the library at 7 this morning, hysterical. I left. He told the school I was in a psych ward. I had to go. She was silent for a moment. Okay, listen carefully. Do not go to a shelter. If your parents filed a missing persons report for a vulnerable adult, shelters are the first place they check. Do you have the documents? In my bag. Good, I'm emailing you a list of youth advocacy lawyers. Use the library computer in the next town over. You need legal protection before you do anything else. And Alina, do not contact your brother. It was sound advice, but I was 19, terrified, and desperately wanted one member of my family to see me. I called Michael. He was in his sophomore year at a state college 2 hours away. He answered on the first ring. Alina, Jesus, Mom and Dad are losing it. They said you had a breakdown and ran off. What's going on? The concern in his voice undid me. I spilled everything: the documents, the SAT score, the meeting, our father's phone call. They've been lying, Michael, to the school, to everyone, about what I am. The line was quiet. I could hear the hum of his dorm in the background. Alina, come on, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? I don't know, but they did. I have proofs. Dad said you got mixed up with some activist at the library who's filling your head with ideas. He said you stole money. His tone had shifted from concern to gentle condescension, the big brother talking down to his confused little sister. Just come home, we'll get you help. You think I'm crazy too? I think you're upset and you're not thinking clearly. Where are you? I'll come get you. He didn't believe me. Of course he didn't. He had grown up in the same narrative. I was the fragile one, the simple one. The truth was too geopolitically destabilizing to his entire worldview. I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to my brother for 3 years. At the library in the next county, I followed Ms. Jenkins's instructions. I found a lawyer, Sylvia Rowe, who specialized in educational law and disability rights. I told her my story over a scratchy phone connection in a study carrel. She listened without interruption. "This is factitious disorder imposed on another in an educational context," she said bluntly. "It's abuse, but proving it in a way that unlocks your future is the trick. We need to get you legally recognized as an independent student for financial aid purposes, which means severing your parents' information from your FAFSA. That requires documentation of abuse. A police report would help." A police report? The idea of walking into a station and accusing my parents of a form of medical and educational abuse was paralyzing. But Sylvia was right. The system was a series of locked doors, and I needed the right keys. Before I could act, my parents found me, or rather, their narrative did. 2 days later, as I was leaving a diner where I'd spent my last $10 on soup, a police cruiser pulled up beside me. An officer stepped out. He wasn't aggressive, just weary. "Alina Vance." My blood turned to ice. "Yes. We've had a report. Your parents are very worried. They said you're off your medication and in a fragile state. We need to make sure you're okay and get you home." The script was perfect. Concerned parents, unstable adult child. I saw the way he looked at me with pity, not suspicion. I was the problem to be managed. "I'm fine," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm not on any medication. My parents have lied to you." "Okay," he said, not believing me. "Why don't you come down to the station with me? We can sort this out, get you something to eat." It was a kindness, but it was also a trap. If I got in that car, I would be delivered back to them. I had one shot. I unzipped my backpack with trembling hands and pulled out the thick folder. I handed him Dr. Moss's evaluation and my SAT score. "My parents told my school I am intellectually disabled. This is an independent psychological evaluation that says I'm not. This is my SAT score. They are lying to keep me dependent. If you take me to them, you are participating in my abuse." He took the papers, frowning. He read the first page of Dr. Moss's report. His expression changed, the professional pity replaced by confusion, then dawning alarm. He looked from the paper to me, back to the paper. "Wait here," he said. He took the folder back to his cruiser, got on the radio. I stood on the sidewalk, shaking, sure he was calling for backup to apprehend the delusional girl. He came back 5 minutes later. He handed me the folder. His demeanor was completely different, cautious, respectful. "I can't force you to go anywhere you don't want to go, ma'am. You're an adult, but your parents have filed a report. They're claiming you're a danger to yourself. That creates a situation." "What do I do?" I whispered. "You file a counter report right now at the station. You allege what you just told me. It creates a paper trail. It won't solve everything, but it creates a conflict in the record. It means the next cop who gets a call about you will see two sides, not just one." Officer Davison, that was his name, became my second unexpected ally. He drove me to the station, not in the back of the cruiser, but in the front passenger seat. He sat with me while I gave my statement, a 4-hour ordeal where I detailed years of educational sabotage. He made sure I got a copy of the report number. It was the single most empowering act of my life up to that point. The system had seen me, and for a moment it had blinked. But my parents were not done. A week later, while I was couch surfing with a friend of Ms. Jenkins, a letter arrived from the school district. My request for an independent reevaluation had been formally denied. The reasons cited: insufficient evidence to override prior parental consent and established IEP, compounded by concerns regarding the student's current stability. My father's lie had worked. The district had chosen the path of least resistance. Believe the parents, doubt the runaway. The door to fixing my record through the school was slammed shut. Sylvia, my lawyer, was furious. "This is cowardice, not policy. We appeal, we go to due process." "But Alina, that's a year-long battle. You don't have a year. You need to be applying to colleges now." We had to find another way. Sylvia had an idea, a Hail Mary. "We bypass the high school transcript entirely. You take the GED, you ace it, then you enroll in community college for 1 semester, you get straight A's. You build a new, clean academic transcript from scratch, then you apply to universities as a transfer student. Your high school record becomes irrelevant." It was a brutal workload. Study for the GED, start college classes, work enough to pay rent on a shared room I'd found. I existed on caffeine, library light, and pure spite. I took the GED. I scored in the top percentile. I enrolled in 3 community college classes: calculus, English composition, and intro to philosophy. For the first time, I was in a classroom where no one knew my history. I was just Alina, the quiet girl who always knew the answer. I got my first A, then my second. The validation was a drug. I was building proof cell by cell. Then the counterstrike. My father, realizing the school district route was frozen, aimed higher. He and my mother hired a private investigator. They were no longer trying to bring me home, they were trying to discredit me. The PI began contacting my professors, my landlord, even the manager at the coffee shop where I worked part-time. He presented himself as a concerned family friend, spinning a story about a deeply troubled young woman with a history of pathological lying, warning them she might try to manipulate them for sympathy. My philosophy professor pulled me aside after class. "A man contacted the department office about you, Alina. He said you have a habit of concocting elaborate stories. Is everything all right at home?" I showed him my police report. I showed him my GED score. The professor, a man named Dr. Armand, read them, his brow furrowed. "This is highly unusual." He didn't say he believed me, but he didn't dismiss me. He gave me his card. "If this continues, let me know. Academic harassment is taken seriously." The campaign of character assassination was terrifying. It was a ghost attack designed to poison every new foundation I tried to build. I was living in a state of constant vigilance, waiting for the next person to look at me with that doubt in their eyes. But the worst was yet to come. In the middle of my first semester finals, Sylvia called me. Her voice was grave. "Alina, your parents have petitioned for guardianship. They've filed in probate court. They're claiming you are an incapacitated person, unable to manage your own affairs due to intellectual disability and mental illness. They're seeking full legal control over you indefinitely." The air left my lungs. Guardianship, it was the ultimate weapon. If they won, I would cease to exist as a legal adult. They could nullify any college acceptance, control my money, my housing, my medical decisions. They could make all of my proof, all of my work, irrelevant with a judge's signature. The hearing was set for 6 weeks away. I had 1 semester of community college, a GED, a police report, and a psychological evaluation against my parents, 20 years of documentation, their respectable front, and their narrative of a loving family struggling with a profoundly disabled child. Sylvia was blunt. "We can fight this, we have evidence, but probate courts are conservative. They often defer to family. You need testimony. You need people who can look a judge in the eye and say, 'This young woman is not who her parents say she is.' You need to show them who you are right now under pressure." So I made a decision. While preparing for the guardianship battle, I would apply to universities, not just any universities, the ones my father had scoffed at when Michael mentioned them years ago, the Ivies. It was insane, it was a moonshot, but I needed a fact so big, so undeniable, that it could shatter their lie in a single blow. I spent Christmas alone in the library writing application essays. I didn't write about baking muffins in life skills class. I wrote about teaching myself calculus from a stolen textbook. I wrote about the architecture of silence and the language of numbers that couldn't be lied about. I asked Dr. Armand and my calculus professor for letters of recommendation. I gave them Sylvia's contact information as my legal counsel. I was no longer just a student, I was a case. The applications went out in January. The guardianship hearing loomed in February. I was living in the suspended space between the future I was clawing toward and the past that was trying to legally reclaim me. Then in late January, an email arrived. The subject line, "Interview Invitation." It was from the admissions office of an Ivy League university. They wanted to speak with me, not as a transfer student, but as a potential freshman based on my GED and community college work. My story, it seemed, had made it past the initial screen. The interview was set for a Wednesday. The guardianship hearing was the following Monday. The timing was almost poetic. I would walk into a room at one of the world's most prestigious institutions and try to convince them of my potential. Then, 4 days later, I would walk into a courtroom and fight to prove I was even legally competent. As I boarded the bus to the city, my single good outfit folded in my bag, I realized this was it. The next 7 days would determine the rest of my life. I was either on the brink of everything I dreamed of in secret or on the precipice of being legally erased. There was no middle ground anymore. The interview wasn't in a fancy office, but a quiet study room overlooking a frozen quad. My interviewer, a woman in her 60s named Professor Walsh, had my entire unconventional file in front of her. She didn't ask about my grades. Her first question was, "Tell me about the library." So I told her about the stolen algebra book, about Ms. Jenkins, about the coded notebooks and the quiet rebellion of self-education. I told her about the diagnosis, the life skills classroom, the pudding. I didn't frame it as a tragedy. I framed it as a research problem I had to solve. How does one learn calculus when the world is insisting you can't count? She listened, her hands steepled. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "What you're describing," she said slowly, "isn't just academic resilience. It's a profound epistemological rebellion. You had to dismantle the very definition of knowledge you were given." She closed my folder. "The committee will have questions about your transcript, of course, but I don't." 4 days later, I walked into the probate courtroom. It was a small, wood-paneled room that smelled of lemon polish and anxiety. On one side, my parents, their lawyer, my brother Michael, looking uncomfortable in a suit. On the other, me, Sylvia, and Ms. Jenkins, who had taken the day off work. Dr. Moss was there as well, ready to testify. My father looked older, deflated. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner, outlined the petition. My parents were seeking permanent plenary guardianship. Their lawyer went first. He painted a picture of a loving, overwhelmed family. He presented my old IEPs, reports from teachers about my limited capacities, doctors' notes about childhood developmental delays. He presented the call log from the school district showing my father's report of my psychiatric hospitalization. He presented affidavits from two neighbors who said I'd always been a bit slow, kept to myself. It was their curated truth, neat and devastating. Then it was our turn. Sylvia stood. She didn't argue. She presented evidence. She entered Dr. Moss's full evaluation into the record. She entered my SAT and GED scores. She entered my community college transcript, all A's. She entered the police report I had filed. Then she called Dr. Moss to the stand. The psychologist was calm, authoritative. She explained her findings, the profound discrepancy, her conclusion of factitious disorder. My parents' lawyer objected, calling it speculation. The judge overruled him. I'll hear the testimony. Then Sylvia called me. I took the stand. I swore to tell the truth. My parents' lawyer approached for cross-examination. He tried to trip me up, to get me to contradict myself, to imply my achievements were flukes or frauds. Miss Vance, if you are so intellectually capable, how do you explain years of teachers documenting your inability to perform basic tasks? Because I was performing the inability they expected, I said, my voice clear in the quiet room. When your only choices are to play along or be punished, you learn the script. Are you claiming all these professionals were fooled by a child? I'm claiming they trusted my parents more than they observed me. He shifted tactics. This independent evaluation you're so fond of, did you pay for it? No, my advocate did. So you can't even manage your own financial affairs for something this important? Doesn't that suggest a need for oversight? Sylvia objected, argumentative. The judge sustained it, but the point hung in the air. He was using my poverty, my instability, as proof of my incompetence. It was clever. I felt the old shame trying to rise. I pushed it down. My parents ensured I had no financial resources, I said, looking directly at the judge, not the lawyer. They controlled every aspect of my life to create the dependency they are now using to argue for permanent control. I am not incapable of managing money. I was systematically prevented from ever having any to manage. The lawyer returned to his table, a slight smirk on his face. He thought he'd landed a blow. Then Sylvia stood up again. Your Honor, I have one more witness. I call Ms. Agatha Jenkins. My parents' lawyer shot to his feet. Objection, relevance, this is a librarian, not a medical professional. She is a character witness to the respondent's capabilities and the petitioner's behavior, Sylvia replied. The judge allowed it. Ms. Jenkins took the stand. She described finding me in the library, my hunger for knowledge. She described helping me study, the systematic way I worked. Then Sylvia asked the crucial question. Ms. Jenkins, did you have any contact with the petitioners, Mr. and Mrs. Vance? Yes, she said, her voice firm. About 2 months ago, Mr. Vance came to the library. He demanded to know if I was helping his daughter. He said I was interfering with her care. He told me, and I remember the exact words, you are giving her ideas above her station. She needs to accept her limitations for her own safety. When I refused to stop helping Alina, he threatened to report me to the library board for misconduct with a vulnerable patron. A murmur went through the courtroom. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw a hard line. And how did you respond? Sylvia asked. I told him his daughter's only limitation was his imagination. Sylvia finished. The judge called for closing arguments. My parents' lawyer gave an emotional plea about parental love, protection, and fear. Sylvia was concise. This court is being asked to permanently remove a young woman's civil rights based on a diagnosis that has been conclusively disproven. The petitioners are not protecting their daughter, they are perpetuating an abuse. Denying this petition isn't just the right legal decision, it is a moral imperative. The judge didn't retire to deliberate. She looked at the stacks of paper on her desk, then at my parents, then at me. This is a troubling case, she began. The standard for guardianship is clear and convincing evidence of incapacity. The petitioners have presented one reality, years of documentation of disability. The respondent has presented another, compelling evidence of high intellectual function and academic success achieved against extraordinary obstacles. She paused, tapping a pen. The court finds the testimony of Dr. Moss credible. The court finds the respondent's recent academic achievements to be objectively verifiable facts. The court finds the actions of the petitioners, particularly the threat to Ms. Jenkins and the false report of psychiatric hospitalization, to be indicative of a pattern of control, not care. My mother let out a small sob. The petition for guardianship, the judge said, is denied. The gavel cracked, the sound was final. My father slumped forward, his head in his hands. My mother cried openly. Michael looked at me, his face a mask of stunned confusion. He had just watched his parents' reality be declared false in a court of law. We walked out of the courtroom into the bland hallway. My parents and their lawyer were a few feet away. My father turned. The defeat in his eyes had curdled into something else, a raw, unvarnished hatred. "You think you've won," he said, his voice low and venomous. "You've just made yourself an orphan. You will never be welcome in our home again. You are dead to us." He took my mother's arm and walked away. Michael hesitated, looking between them and me. For a second, I thought he might stay. Then he turned and followed them. That was the last time I saw any of them. The victory was ash in my mouth. I had my freedom, but I had just been formally disowned. Sylvia put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry it had to end that way." "It was the only way it could end," I said, and I believed it. 2 weeks later, the decision from the Ivy League university arrived. I sat on the floor of my tiny rented room, a large envelope in my lap. Ms. Jenkins was on the phone. "Open it," she whispered. I did. The first word was congratulations. I had been accepted, not as a transfer, as a freshman, and on the next page, the financial aid award letter, a full scholarship, tuition, room, board, books, everything. I read the amount aloud to Ms. Jenkins over the phone. There was a long silence, then she started to cry. "You did it, kid, you actually did it." The university required a final, official high school transcript, my sealed, fraudulent one. Sylvia advised me to send it along with the court order denying guardianship and Dr. Moss's evaluation. Let them see the whole story. The response from the admissions office was a masterclass in discretion. They welcomed me and said my unique educational journey would be a valuable addition to their community. They assigned me a dedicated academic advisor to help with the transition. The lie was now a footnote, not a definition. The news, of course, reached my parents. I didn't tell them. The guidance counselor from my old high school, upon processing the transcript request, did. She called them as a courtesy to congregate the family on such an amazing achievement. My mother called me. It was the middle of the night. Her voice was ragged, broken. "Is it true, the scholarship?" "Oh, yes." She was silent for so long I thought she'd hung up. How did you, after everything she couldn't finish. "You know how, moms, you were theirs." She started crying, great heaving sobs. We thought we were keeping you safe from disappointment, from a world that would crush you. We thought we were loving you." It was the closest to an apology I would ever get, and it wasn't an apology for lying. It was an apology for misunderstanding my needs. It was a justification. I felt nothing. "Goodbye, Mom." I hung up. I changed my number the next day. I started university that fall. The campus was a different planet. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who didn't think a differential equation was a strange and frightening thing. I struggled not with the work but with the sheer normalcy of it. No one was waiting for me to fail. No one looked at me with pity. I was just another student. I found a therapist on campus. We worked through the grief, not just for my family, but for the 12-year-old girl who believed she was broken. I learned the clinical term for what they did: educational sabotage, a form of coercive control. Knowing it had a name helped. It meant I wasn't the only one. In my sophomore year, I got a LinkedIn message from Michael. It was stiff, formal. He said he was engaged. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking. He asked if we could talk. I met him at a coffee shop near his job. He was different, softer. He told me that after the courtroom, things at home had imploded. Our parents had turned on each other, a bitter blame game that ended in a quiet, loveless divorce. He had started therapy himself. "I should have believed you," he said, staring into his coffee. "I chose the easy story. I'm sorry." It wasn't a full reconciliation. The trust was too fractured. But we started talking once a month. A cautious, new relationship built as adults, not the roles assigned to us as children. I never spoke to my father again. I heard through Michael that he moved to another state, told people his daughter had died. A part of me had. I graduated with honors in mathematics. Ms. Jenkins, Sylvia, and Dr. Moss sat in the audience. My brother was there too. As I walked across the stage, I thought about the girl in the life skills class, the one practicing telling time on a cardboard clock. I thought about the sheer, improbable distance between that moment and this one. After graduation, I was offered a research position. I now work in educational policy, specifically focused on safeguards for twice exceptional students and improving the identification process to be less reliant on parent and teacher referral, which is where the whole system failed me. The irony is not lost on me. Last year, I received a letter in the mail, no return address, but the postmark was from my hometown. It was from my mother, a single sheet of paper, no greeting, just 6 sentences. "I saw a picture of you in an article about your work. You look like a stranger, a capable, smart stranger. I have a box of your things, your old notebooks, the ones from the library. I don't know why I kept them. Do you want them?" I didn't respond for a month, then I wrote back, a single sentence on a postcard. "Yes, send them to my office." The box arrived last week. It's sitting in the corner of my study unopened. I'm not ready to see those coded words, the desperate scribbles of the girl I was, but I will open it because they are mine. The story, the proof, the life I built in secret, it all belongs to me now. The lie my parents told was meant to make me small, to keep me where they could manage me. In the end, it did the opposite. It forged a person who could not be managed. A person who understood that the most powerful thing you can do is to quietly, stubbornly learn the truth for yourself, no matter who tells you not to. That unopened box in the corner of my study is more than just old notebooks. It's a monument to a paradox. The very act of trying to erase me created the person who could not be erased. We talk about abuse in physical terms in loud, visible scars, but the most devastating violence can be quiet. It can be a diagnosis on a form, a signature on a page, a story told so convincingly that the world agrees to look away. What happened to me wasn't an accident, it was architecture. And for every child placed in a classroom beneath their capacity, for every student whose curiosity is called a behavioral problem, that architecture is still standing. My story isn't about a triumph over evil parents. It's about a systemic failure that allowed their story to be the only one that mattered for years. It's about how our systems for identifying both disability and giftedness are flawed, biased, and far too easy to manipulate when the people entrusted with a child's care become their jailers. I don't have a neat ending. My family is a map of fractures. Some bridges are gone forever. Others are being rebuilt slowly with the careful distance of engineers who know the ground is unstable. The grief for the childhood I lost, for the family I thought I had that doesn't disappear, it just becomes a part of the landscape you learn to navigate. But here is what I know for sure now. Your mind is your first and last sovereign territory. No one can occupy it without your consent. They can build walls around you, they can write lies on your passport, they can tell the whole world you are simple, but if you protect one secret space inside yourself, a curiosity, a question, a hunger for a truer story, that is the seed of your escape. You must become your own teacher, your own witness, your own proof. If you are in a silent war for your own reality, if someone is telling you that you are less than you know yourself to be, I want you to hear this. You are not crazy. Your truth does not expire. It is waiting for you to gather it piece by piece until it becomes too heavy for their lies to carry. Start where you are, find your library, find your one person who sees you, write your proof in whatever cipher you must, and then build your life brick by brick on the foundation of what you know to be true about yourself. Let them call it rebellion. You'll know it's just you finally coming home to your own mind. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever had to defend your own reality against a story someone else wrote for you, tell me in the comments. Say, I see you. And if you want more stories about the quiet battles that define us, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.